I am an African.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Africa for Dummies. Again, this is a second part to the first episode. If you want more context, please make sure to check out the first one. And we're back now with the second one. So enjoy the conversation.
Yeah, I think for baggage, I feel there's something by Nyerere, the former president of Tanzania. He's quite a philosopher. He was saying he was that he was talking to people from Europe, and people they were like basically asking him, "Oh, how is Burundi? How is Ghana? And is he from Tanzania, right?" And I feel like everyone can relate to this because one time I remember I was in uni, and this white guy came and uh, he asked me, and after I was like, "Oh no, I'm from Zambia," and then it's like, "Oh wow, my my grandmother's carer is from Zimbabwe." So in my mind, I was just like, okay, and then what? What am I supposed to do with this information?
I did
Like,
do that
why should I?
information.
Yeah, what am I supposed to do with this information? Like, what value is it to my life that your grandmother's carer is from Zimbabwe?
Although,
But at
go
the
ahead.
but at the end of the day, like if when people make this, immediately you kind of like, this is a very stupid question. But the more people sort
No,
of
actually,
lump you
no.
up into one, no, the more people lump you up into one, you sort of feel the need to know more about other African countries. Like you realize just how much, like you're sort of on your feet and you're like, okay, wait, I should know about these other African countries. Why don't I know about? Because remember, like how me and Nathan used to argue about American politics, like internal American politics. But would we
Yeah,
ever argue about Ghanaian politics?
fair enough.
Probably not. Do you know what I mean?
But
But then when someone asks you, is like for example, one of my lecturers once even asked me, he's like, "Oh, how is the situation about like cultural and traditional practices in Malawi? We heard that albinos are being killed because of traditional beliefs, witchcraft and so on," which is true and which is a serious problem. Um, and I didn't know that much about it. I didn't know that much about it, and I thought this is Malawi. Like I should
Yeah.
know quite a bit, and yet you're arguing about Brexit, and then what? Like,
Mhm.
what's Brexit supposed to do to the everyday African? You know what I mean? So I feel like on one side it's sort of like a stupid question, but inevitably I sort of feel the need to learn more about other African countries because at the end of the day, if you really are like pan-Africanist,
Mm.
I'm not saying you should know everything about Africa, but you should be competent enough to sort
Yeah.
of like have that confident like conversation that, okay, this is what's happening and this is what I think, this is my opinion about it. We're very
fair.
conversant in the opinions of the US and
Yeah, yeah.
Black Lives Matter
No, I
and
mean, fair
George
enough.
Floyd and
Fair
what,
enough.
do you know what I
But,
mean?
but like here's my thing. Like I obviously see it for me when I look at it, which is a good way of looking at it as well. Like, okay, I should know more about this.
Yeah.
Like for me, I see it as like, okay, this is someone reaching, trying to just like relate to me to a certain,
Yeah,
you know,
pulling for anything
pulling
to
for
try and relate.
anything and just being like, hey man, I have a friend from here. Like, can we talk about that? Like maybe I don't know. Like you know.
Um,
Yeah.
But at
I
this,
feel like,
you go
yeah,
ahead. Go
sorry.
ahead. No, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm trying to piggyback off your point, so carry
Yeah.
on.
No, no, no. I was going to say, but then sometimes at the same time, it's like if you're to reverse the situation, like I don't think that's how you think about it, though. Like if I was to ask
Yeah.
someone, like when I meet someone from, say, Chile, I'm not gonna tell them I met someone from Brazil.
True.
If I met
Yeah.
someone from Germany, I'm not gonna tell them about someone from Ukraine, like unless that person's lived there. Like, hey, I had a friend from Ukraine who used to live in Germany and he told me XYZ. I used to have a friend in Brazil, but he grew up in Chile
Yeah.
and he told me about X, Y, and Z. What do you think? You know? But I mean I
Mm.
think that that doesn't have any harm to it anyways at the end of the day. Like when
I
someone's
don't know.
yeah.
I love how both of you have different sides, right? I
Yeah.
love that Zengi is looking at it and it's pushing him into a more positive light rather than from your end, Nathan. What I was getting, when you
Yeah.
say you feel the need to not live up to certain stereotypes, like you're not
Yeah.
100. yourself. And I feel, and that's where I was going with the whole having to validate your being in their spaces. And for me, that's not okay. Like, I feel like if say what's the stereotype? That black people are loud and obnoxious.
I was
Say
literally
I'm a
about to
loud
say that. I was literally about to say that.
No, say I'm a loud and obnoxious person. I am going to allow myself to be loud and obnoxious. If that person decides to think, oh yeah, I met one black girl, and for sure, all black people,
All
all
black
Africans,
girls,
yeah, I'm loud and obnoxious, and this is how they think, and this is how they eat. That's them. That's their stance. And
Nah, that's just
like I feel like every time we try to not live up to the stereotypes, or we try to educate, like I said, I'm going to keep putting this in like brackets, every time we feel the need to educate other people about who we are, I feel like we're still trying to validate ourselves in their presence. And for me, that's like, at this point, we should not be doing that. We should not care if they think we fly, or we're using speakers, or we live in huts. That's it. Like,
actually, I feel, some of these things, some of these stereotypes, a lot of them are negative because the way Africa's history has been, it was very Eurocentric, and the things that what should actually be our proud civilization and achievements were actually seen as a negative stereotype. So as ourselves, like, if we don't own our own, like, history, we sort of look at it in a very negative way. Like, for example, this guy, there's a guy I met from Scandinavia, I think. I don't remember which country it's from, but he was like, they are they huts? Do people still live in huts in Africa?
Yeah.
But in my mind, I didn't see huts as a bad thing. You know what I mean? I just saw it as an alternative civilization.
I see what you guys' point is.
But naturally, if
Wait, I like the phrase you used, alternative civilization.
It is an alternative civilization. It is, because naturally you'd be ashamed.
Yeah,
you'd be ashamed to say no. We have skyscrapers, we have gleaming buildings. So what if we don't?
Think about this. I've been thinking about this for a minute, actually. When we travel, right, if you go to Europe and you go and see sightseeing, right, and you go and visit some old university in say Italy, you'll be like, like, oh my gosh, the history, the sunshine. But if you won't think about going to Mali and visiting the university there. If you go
the
to
historical university
North
in
America,
Timbuktu,
those ice huts, they're called igloos, right?
Yeah.
You think in those, right? And you'll be like, oh my gosh, this is so fascinating. But then you want to look at a hut as though it's just different forms of living.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah.
Very true. Very
I think there's nothing.
No, I just love the way you termed it. I was just
it is because that's what I remember.
No, it's because the thing is, I've never heard someone term me like that, so I just love the way it was just like...
Because I feel but that's the thing, because we're so like consumed in it now, four-cornered house, minimalist structure. We were so consumed in how this architecture is. I don't know, like, I haven't met that many people with Nathan is dying in laughter.
Oh my gosh, can you please come back?
I don't live in huts. I live in it's called alternative living. Look it up.
You can say huts if you want to, but
No, I get you. Yeah.
I think we should definitely own our architecture, civilization, because like, other people, when you see Tudor houses, you walk into it and it's brand new, it's got a bank, it's got all the technology that you have. Why can't a hut be like that?
It's very eco-friendly, by the way.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll just lump the two questions, probably. Within Africa, there's various distinctions, right? We've got over 3,000 ethnic groups, apparently. What's the population of Africa? 1.3 billion?
Over.
Yeah, around 1.3 over 1.3 billion people. So, and then we've got over 3,000 ethnic groups, over 2,100 languages. So even if within Africa we have these little distinctions, you know what I mean? What necessarily distinguishes an African, and can you actually say there's something like an African value? You know how people say, oh, these are African parents. oh, these, this is an African here. Like, when you identify one, you just know. But can you actually say there's one thing that you can say generally all Africans have, or like customs or
The
behaviors?
history of colonialism, that's what we share. People need
No,
to
but I'm talking
stop.
about behavior, though, not history, behavior.
Yes, yes.
I
I feel like people need to stop. I have like when I was like, this is an interesting one. This was the question I was actually looking at. There is this umbrella term now of like African. Even people who've never stepped foot on the continent identify as African. And it's just like, but what is it exactly? Apart from being black and sharing
Right.
a history, a very traumatic history. What are those values exactly? Like, I'm so curious because cultures are very different, traditions are very different. And if you look at I think a quick study, let's look at in Nigeria, like the Biafrans, trying to leave Nigeria and everything. It's just because of the differences. It's like we are different people. We are absolutely different people. We do not want to be identified as one group. And the only reason they're still stuck as Nigeria is because there is this fear in Africa of breaking the borders the white man left. There's just like
very, very, very fascinating point
of breaking those borders. And that's the only reason. But if you look at it, like back in the day, personally, the way I like to imagine Africa before colonialism, there are different people living peacefully or not peacefully. It depends on where you are at what time period. Like, but it depends at what time. Yeah. But I feel like differences have always been appreciated. I don't think there was ever an African term. There was never an umbrella, and it's only there now because of the shared history of trauma. Like that's my take anyway. Nathan?
Yeah.
No, I was going to piggyback off of what you're going to say because I was going to say it's very difficult to even say like what a couple of values that like all Africans have because even within the same countries we vary quite dramatically because just just Zambia itself, you have
very different.
Just different when you tribes are different.
Over 70 ethnic groups.
70 ethnic groups, and each of them has got different values, and so like it's
Zambia
difficult.
Over 70, Tanzania 120 plus.
Yeah.
I feel for me I think the most agreeable African value, and you only realize this once you leave, when you compare, is maybe Asians might also relate to this. It's communalism. There's and this is not only sub-Saharan African, even North Africa, I feel also they have these elements where basically there is a collective. No, but this also varies. It depends. It varies. There's a collective or communal mentality where, and this is bad and good, where everything is your business.
Yeah.
It's you know what I mean. It's a good thing in the sense that there's no such thing as an orphan in Africa traditionally. There's no such thing as an old home in Africa traditionally. If anyone is around, you pitch in and you help out. If you know what I mean. Like if
I'm just
Yunia was
remembering
my
in
sister.
Zambia, yeah. I was just remembering
You know what I mean?
in Zambia,
It's
just
good.
like something
it's good because
happens,
it provides.
Yeah, and then you just hear Nango.
It provides. which you have to tell our listeners what that means. What that means, guys.
Okay. But the thing is, when you translate,
it means how about this one?
It doesn't slap with
it. Doesn't slap.
But it basically means how about this one?
Yeah.
But I think what it is I feel the good thing about the communal thing is that it gives you a safety net in that, like, for example, if Yunia was my sister and God forbid something happened to her and she had kids, those kids will be mine. No negotiation. Those kids will be mine. All right? And I have to do anything possible to make sure those kids succeed. Right?
Yeah.
That's just tradition. Of course, this changes because of urbanization. We get working class, middle class jobs, and it becomes difficult. But the downside to that is because everything is my business. Oh, if Yunia gets a nose piercing, why is Yunia getting a nose piercing? These are not, this looks a bit, everything is your business because, if Yunia is wearing a skirt, let's give her something respectable. Let's give her chitenge. And chitenge is a wrap for those who aren't African. If, Nathan's got cornrows right now. Yeah, guys. Nathan has cornrows now.
Yeah.
Why has Nathan got cornrows?
He must be
everything
doing
is our
drugs.
business.
He's doing
Yeah.
drugs.
So yeah.
However,
I feel that's a communal. That's something everyone, all Africans.
I don't even think that's a bad thing. I think now the older I grow, maybe this is just me growing older, but the older I grow, I realize that's not even the way we complain about it. It's just because of westernization that we actually think it's like you're too much in my business. It's because we've been westernized. I don't like. Okay, let me finish my point. Also,
yeah, go ahead.
You were talking about how it's Africans and maybe Asians. I think everyone, however, like maybe not Europeans, but
you finish your point.
It's just not the Europeans. I've seen it in every culture that's not white. That's just my view. Anyway,
yeah,
like the communal respect, all of that, like just living together, being one people. It's for me. I've seen at least from most of the cultures
respect your elders also.
Because I was just to piggyback.
And most of the times, it's described as being westernized because it's not. It's something they introduced, like the whole nuclearness. And funny enough, even they are beginning to revolt against it. Like there's all of these sentiments of like it's not a natural thing to just leave you, your mother, your father alone. Like it's not normal. It's just it's not the normal order of life. So I would argue and say that it's just everyone except Europeans. And I don't know what their history is really as to why they're the way they are. But I don't think it's a bad thing because if, like you said, right, if my parents died, my uncle would take me on. It in the same way, I feel like it comes from a place of like love and looking out for the community. I should be concerned if Nathan has braided his hair as a guy, which is not the norm. It's like what's happening, like it's not necessarily like
there's something wrong with your head, Nathan. Did you hear that?
Good place. Nathan, sorry to use as an example.
No
but
problem,
like that's I think like traditionally that's where the culture is. Like we look at it in you're in my space, but it's like you're doing something that's not the norm. We have to question it. We have to wonder if you're okay.
But I feel
just to add to what Yunia was saying. Now I don't know if it's a purely European thing, but the example I will give is a European example. So like I just to add to what you're saying, I was talking to a friend of mine and I remember we were just talking about like the differences in our countries, and she comes from a Scandinavian country, and I remember telling her like, in Zambia it's not weird to hear someone like an old lady just come up to you and saying, "Oh, mwana wangu, mtandizeko," or something, which translates to, "Oh, my child, help me." And she was so freaked out. She was so freaked out. She was like, "What?" I was like, "Yeah, it's not weird like for someone to literally call you, 'Hey brother, hey sister, can you help me with this?'" And they're like, she was like, "Yo, you do that in my country?" And like, yo, this person will look at you like you're weird. Like what's going on? And I certainly do agree because like I can say that my first 2 months here, because like I literally didn't know anyone, like it was tough because nobody's in your business. Like nobody's like there to like help. It's kind of just like it's you by yourself. And to be honest, the first people that kind of like gravitated towards me and just like we're like, "Hey man, we're like African people, Zimbabweans to be specific."
Yeah, I think there's pros. I think there's pros and cons because I feel when it comes to
I mean, they're cons in the sense that I feel like
there's cons in the sense that, especially like when you look at these issues of, how some women get beaten for the way they dress, indecent exposure, and oftentimes it's not that indecent. like someone walking in a CBD and then predominantly men would attack the woman to the point of sexual harassment, but sometimes they just give them a rap or a chitenge. They call it different things across Africa, but that's the name in Zambia. I feel that concern can also be abused, and it can also sort of trample on other people's just basic liberties of how you're living life.
Even
Anyway,
even in an economic sense, even in an economic sense, I think it hampers innovation. I think, in my personal
liberty, like liberal thinking in terms of innovation,
because
and so on.
you're afraid to go against the norm, and innovation.
That's actually a very good angle to look at it.
And innovation tends to require you to kind of sometimes go against the
sort of like question the system.
Exactly.
How Africa is depicted often defines Africa, and what I want to ask basically is, how can we relate to how Africa is depicted in popular culture? Which is the real Africa? And who exactly are the real Africans? When we look at stuff like movies, Coming to America 1, Coming to America 2, this glorification of Africa, Wakanda as well, sort of Afrofuturism and very technology savvy Africa. And then there's also often, not all the time, often white journalist that says big, press sign on their chest, and then behind them is this little skinny, bony baby with a bloated stomach and one persistent fly somewhere around the face, depicting African hunger. These are the images, sort of like the contrasting images. And who is the real Africa? How do we see what the real Africa is, and how should Africans project themselves? And what do we think should be the real depiction of Africa? Should it be that romantic view of Africa is kings and queens and
I think to be very honest with you, I think that romantic view comes from the US.
Yeah.
I seldom hear that viewpoint from people that are actually here. Actually in Africa, or like people who are born and raised in Africa. Like people who are born and raised in Africa tend to have either a very pessimistic or a very realistic view of Africa. I think that people in America, like when you look at Wakanda, like what's the movie called, Black Panther, I think everything in it, it's like to a certain degree, you would even wonder if those people have been to Africa, because like it just feels like it was something really, like, not even to kind of prop up, like, yes, they used African extras and used some African words in there, but like I don't think it was done even to like kind of big up Africa. I think it was mostly done to big up Black Americans, and that's another conversation in terms of the differences between Black Americans and Africans. But like
that's a whole different
conversation. But like you can see, it was mainly, especially looking at the political climate at the time and all those sorts of things, it seems like it was just mainly done to please that
Black Americans.
I
love
what do you think, Yunia?
I love that he mentioned the whole it was for Black Americans, and I wish people could make that distinction, because I know it's a very, like, it's emotional for them, I've been told. So I try to not speak on the matter of Black Americans and Africans, but I wish the whole Black Panther movie was not termed African, was not associated with Africa, because like what Nathan said, an African born and bred in Africa is either pessimistic or realistic. And right now on the ground, even me as someone, and when I say realistic, it's like, even I feel like I lie on the realistic side. Right now on the ground, Africans are working towards a better future. That's all we're doing. We're not glorifying, like, we're not in this dream fantasy land where
there's not that romanticism going on.
No romanticism of any kind. Like, people are just seriously working for a better future. And to have this, like, Wakanda, Shanshani, Africa, forever, it really, man, it irks my spirit so much, because you will also see, if Wakanda was done by an African, there wouldn't be the mix of cultures They wouldn't just be like, you will notice a lot things that are done by non-Africans tend to have a mix of cultures, which is a thing we don't do as Africans.
To
I will
lump
not
up everyone. Yeah.
we don't mix cultures. A Bemba girl will not go and pick up a misisi and wear it to her Chilangamulilo. It just doesn't, like, you don't do that.
That makes
We are all
sense.
Africans, but we don't do that. We
Mhm.
respect the cultures individually. So anyway, depiction for me, I would say we as Africans need to start telling our stories more. We need
Mm.
more African storytellers. One of the things that really dawned on me when I started like going abroad and everything was how little information there is on Google. And sometimes we think, I don't know if it's because we are very reliant on our neighbors. We don't ask Uncle Google for things, so we don't feel the need to put things on Google. But like a lot
Yeah.
of also what people know out there, but like we need to put more of our own stories out there.
Yeah.
Like for ourselves, we need to tell our stories for ourselves, what they really are here. So yeah, could you
True.
read the question again? Because I feel like I've lost track.
Well, the question basically is, what is the real depiction of Africa, and how do you think it should be depicted? There's that
Yeah,
stereotype of the hungry
I think
baby,
it
and then
should be
obviously they
depicted
romanticize.
the way that it is. I'm seeing a lot of African films that are coming up, and they're very real. They will show you the nice
Yeah.
parts. They will show you the ghetto. They will show you
Recommend. Some people want to watch African movies.
Oh, okay. You can watch like Savage Beauty. There's a recent one I watched. It's not that great, but it's okay.
Okay.
What else? Glamour Girls is a movie about prostitution, but it's like it's just showing you like prostitutes are there for
Real
real,
life.
and people are, there's no like there isn't this westernization happening in the movies anymore. Like people are not
Yeah.
trying to show themselves. I don't know. For me, it's
I think Queen
not.
of Katwe also was a good
Oh
one.
yes.
Yeah.
That was really good. Yeah. Even
I
Kazali
feel,
is coming up, by the way.
yeah, I feel the depiction. It's always, as you said, it's it often reflects the fact that it was produced and written by some Western producer
Yeah.
or some Western concept. And you see, the thing about African information about Africa, it's always about who's the first to the mic. And often the people with the power to have the mic are normally in the Western world. So even when you find racism in China, it's sort of like second-hand information from the Western. Like what CNN tells me or what this news organization tells me about Africa is that you guys are poor. There's conflict. So the chances are that you're not a very nice person. So me, for example, in Shanghai, do not like African people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's sort of like second-hand information, and that's how So Africans need to sort of get to the mic and tell their own stories. I think that's the most important thing. The way it is, in sort of like the raw detail. It doesn't have to be exaggerated. It doesn't have to be about trying to make people feel good, but it's sort of like about the challenges and what people go through. You're not going to get roses and flower petals upon arrival at some little airstrip, and or the queen of some country is going to meet you.
When it comes to this can we not as Africans get on the Black American wave of calling ourselves kings and queens? It irks me. I really hate it because you know that in a kingdom there are kings, there are queens, there are servants. Some people are descendants of servants. There is no shame. There is no shame in being the descendant of the king's hand. There isn't, and I just feel like this whole kings and queens is denial of who we are as people. Like it's romanticism.
I think if you are part of the diaspora, even the ancestral diaspora, where like your parents were slaves, like generation after generation has lived out of Africa, you are either very pessimistic of Africa because maybe you might have left Africa because of terrible reasons, war, or someone screwed you up over corruption or so on. So your memories of Africa are bad. So you make sure everyone who you meet, who probably doesn't have that knowledge about Africa, that much knowledge about Africa, and doesn't meet that many Africans, you would give them the view that Africa is a very bad place. Oh, I'm from Sierra Leone, there was war, I left during the war, it was bad, terrible. You go to Sierra Leone, Those guys are partying, man. It's Friday night. It's lit. Do you know what I mean? Or it could be that romanticism of, I left Africa and I want to believe that Africa is good. Everyone who says anything bad about Africa is terrible.
Yeah.
There is no corruption. It's only white people that are corrupt. There is no this, like over romanticism. And then you arrive in Africa and you just meet the immigration guy and the guy doesn't give a damn about who you are. You come home, my brother. My brother, you're at the airport in Lusaka. So, my brother, how are you? What are you doing here? Purpose of visit? Purpose of... you know what I mean? Like, no one is going to be, like, clapping for you. So I think we have to sort of understand where these people are coming from and, like, what their journeys are in life. But as Africans, I totally agree with Yunia. It should just be the raw truth as it is.
The truth.
You know what I mean? Yeah. I don't know if Nathan, you have anything to add. Let's just. I think if Nathan, you don't have anything to add, I wanted to ask, just like for each of us, because we started off with describing what an African, what Africa means, and what the first word that comes into your mind when you think of Africa. Now, when you think of Africa going forward, when you think of how many young Africans, how in the future by 2050 it says half of those population's growth, if not more, will be from Africa, and how most of the young people in the world in 2050 will be from Africa. How would you now, looking at where we're going and where Africa is now, how would you describe Africa in one word? Or even, let's just say one phrase to make it easier. So starting with Yunia, how would you describe Africa in one phrase?
No, don't start with me. Don't start with me.
Nathan. Nathan, she's still thinking about it. Nathan, how would you describe Africa?
And this is not because I just wrote a thesis regarding this particular word, but resilient.
Okay.
Resilient. Yeah. Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
How would you describe it, Yunia? Have you thought about a word or a phrase?
Who we are. I don't think I've thought of like where we are going, like who. I would say though, what I hope is we become a proud people. I really do. Something that I want to pass on, that my aim is every time I have these conversations with anyone really that will listen to me, is just being proud. There is a mentality that I always like to say, like, sit at the table. We need to stop fighting for it at the table. Like, one thing that I desire for Africans now and Africans moving forward is build your own damn table and don't ask the neighbor if it's nice.
True.
Yeah. Like, if it's like the table, it's nice. We need to stop making movies and thinking, is this international standards? Making music and thinking, is this... No. Do you like it?
Will other people like it? Yeah.
Hey, I don't know. Can this even play in America? We don't care.
That's interesting. That's interesting because there's sorry to have time, but
no problem.
This super interesting book. Got the name, but it's by this author called Titi Ndangarembwa from Zimbabwe. Oh God, I forgot the name of the book, but it's an amazing book about the perspective of a Black African. She's the first woman to write a book like that ever. With the perspective of a Black African woman in a post-colonial Zimbabwe, and sort of the rural-urban divide. But what was interesting about the book is the book to familiarize non-Africans. Like, there were terms in the book that only if you're from Africa you would know, or from Zimbabwe you'd know. Like, you know how in books they're like, okay, sadza. Sadza is a porridge type of cake, type of meal that Africans eat, so that people can understand. No. She just said it, and then you Google it on yourself.
Yeah.
Like how, for example, and this is interesting because even Chimamanda also said this. Like, how am I supposed to know snow? Africans, like, when we read books, European books, American books, we are supposed to know snow by default.
Exactly.
No one is. There's no bracket that's introducing snow.
Nothing.
You know what I mean? No bracket that's introducing what winter is. Pudding. You know what I mean? I have some and sugar with sour milk or normal milk. How am I supposed to know what pudding is when I'm reading a book from school. You know what I mean? So that book
Yeah.
was very interesting because she didn't try and introduce a non-African audience to it. And I feel that's good because it sort of gives people the perspective of an African reader and an African author. So for me, my word, it's similar to Nathan's. It's strength because I feel there's a lot of challenges that come with being an African, but you also have to be incredibly resilient to be an African, because you are fighting what is really not fighting, but you're sort of existing by your existence. You're sort of fighting a status quo and a default that will constantly challenge you. You know, like what you said about we have to make it international standards. There's that need for you to need validation, that need for you to develop and sort of like, okay, how, you know, if it's like this in England, there's nothing wrong with learning from other people. But if it's like this in England, maybe we should also do it like this. If it's like this in America, maybe we should. If it's like this in China, maybe we should also. Why can't you just do it yourself? Make it work for you. And I think it requires a lot of, it requires a lot of strength because it's very easy for you to simply be swayed and say, okay, you know what? Let's just do it.
And sorry to just to jump in. I'll say this really really quickly, but I think like also the reason why I also said resilient to just similar to what you said is like for I think when I was doing my research for my thesis, like that was the first time that I ever went like deep in Zambia, like deep. Like for me, usually I'm in the cities, Lusaka, Ndola, Kitwe, Livingstone, and like. But then, like, this was the first time where I went to a place like where it's like no develop, like you, like you know, like no like development, whatever you want to call development. Like this was now me like realizing for the first time, like okay, no, like there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And when I went there, um like one thing that stuck out to me was just the fact that like you know you see people who literally have nothing and yet they still smile, you know, and they're still happy, and I think that's why I was just like resilience is, you know, because like it definitely gave me a new perspective.
We really are people.
Yeah, so I guess that's it. And yeah, so Nathan, do you want to close this off because we do have
I think we have 30 seconds. We have, yeah, but
thank you for having me.
no problem. Anytime. Thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you like this episode. Leave us a review and follow us on all platforms. Thank you.
Taught never to dishonor the cause of freedom. I am the child of Nongause. I am he who made it possible to trade in the world markets in diamonds and gold and the same food for which our stomachs yearn. Being part of all of these people, and in the knowledge that none dares contest that assertion, I shall claim that I'm an African. Today, it feels good to be an African.